So I work two places. I'm partly a professor at the University of Stavanger at an institute called the Norwegian School of Hotel Management, which is a kind of a misleading name because we are heavily involved in tourism. Also, we have two main bachelor programs in hotel management and tourism management. So I'm involved in the tourism management part. And we also have a master's program called International Hospitality and Tourism Leadership, which is an Anglophone program, and we recruit students from not from all over the world, but from most continents. And so that might be of interest. Maybe if you have some clever students, you could tell them that they either could go there for an exchange or they could take the whole 2-year program. It's a micro master program. So the thesis part is only 1 term. So the last spring term. And we're this Norwegian School of Hotel Management is kind of a mixed institution. It used to be mainly into hotel, and we have staff with a very diverse background, with mainly an emphasis on what it's called human relations. But also we have several people involved in marketing and also tourism as such. So I'm trained as a sociologist, but for many years I've been involved in multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary research, mainly because of the research council. So we had, in order to get research funding, we have had to go between different programs and also to collaborate with people with various backgrounds. And my other institution is the Institute of Transport Economics, also a misleading name because it's more like a social science institute with still quite a lot of transport economics, but also a large part is related to traffic safety and also organizing of local transport. But this institute has conducted research in tourism since the late 1960s. So those people are not here there today, but there is a long history of tourism research, mainly applied. So for instance, I've studied visitor satisfaction of national scenic roads, tourism routes, tourism route developments, commissioned by this is called again the National Public Roads Administration, and conducted similar research also in Sweden. So as I said, I'm kind of a jack of all trades in tourism research. So I've been involved in mainly consumer behavior, economists would say, also marketing. So recently, I've conducted research also in other parts of Spain. Last year, together with a Spanish-Danish colleague, we did a study on tourism, tourist decision-making and social media. So we have already published one paper in the Kr.Steen's new outlet, Tourist Management Perspectives. You probably know that it is those papers, as he called it, papers that marginally fail in tourist management. They published there, so it's kind of the litter box for Kr.Steen. And we have yet another paper from an early Mallorca study coming up in Scandinavian Journal of Hospitality and Tourism. Scandinavian Journal of Hospitality and Tourism is a journal that was established by the Norwegian School of Hotel Management some 11 years ago, together with the publisher Taylor and Francis. It's kind of the middle of the road, so quite good, I would say, isn't it? Quite good journal. And you should feel free to interrupt me. So what I'm going to speak about today is mainly the results, or mainly based on two papers. One is published in Annals of Tourism Research. You can find it on Science Direct. It's called Tourist Perceptions of Summer Weather in Scandinavia. And the other one is called Cool Weather Tourism and the Global Warming. And it is also available on Science Direct. Now it's in press in tourist management. We didn't fail this time. So we got, and a third paper that I'm not mentioning too much today. It's published in Climate Research called Tourist Weather Preferences in Europe's Arctic. And it's not really Arctic in a strict sense all the way, because it's north of the Arctic Circle. So what we did, maybe are there some questions relating to my mixed background. So you should feel free to comment and ask questions on the way if you like to. What we did was this project has the history of this project is that maybe I should say that some 5 years ago or 6 years ago I thought that the climate and weather aspects are some of the most important issues to research in relation to tourism. And I also saw that this was an area that it would be possible to obtain funding for quite large projects. And I had already been involved in collaboration with natural scientists. We did a study, for instance, a study that was published in Landscape and Urban Planning on tourist landscape preferences, together with a vegetation ecologist, for instance. So we started. So we didn't get funding in the first round, but in the second round we succeeded. And then we had to take on board many different kinds of people. So I'll come back to that later also. So and as you know better than I do, weather can influence tourist activities in several ways. And most destinations are affected by weather, even if you have some quite stable climate in the Canary Islands. You know, you've seen the movement of tourism from Las Palmas to the southern part some decades ago, which I think is at least partly weather related. I still love the Las Canteras beach, but those people who want to be secure in relation to a sunny holiday, they would rather go to Maspalomas or Puerto Morgan or somewhere else. And also due to global environmental change, the climate and weather in many areas are likely to alter, and thus causing redistribution of climatic assets among tourism regions. So, and luckily, that is possibly the situation also in Norway's Arctic, which is the area that we got money to study, because the northern areas in Norway are prioritized in research council context. So that's why we wanted to look into that. So Norway is in a sense lucky. We didn't only find oil and gas, but also it is warming up, so we can keep our houses warm in winter for lower expense. And as you'll see, there are some benefits for tourism also. And as you might know, few studies have covered to any notable extent non-urban tourist pursuits typical to such high latitude destinations as Scandinavia's Arctic, where temperate to cool but mostly non-dramatic summer climate prevails. So this is an area in the summertime that it is not as cold and dark as some of you might imagine. So we had 3 case areas. One is the Vesterålen Archipelago, which is close to the Lofoten Islands. So the Lofoten Islands, some of you might have heard of it. It's not really internationally recognized, but I mean, quite a few North Europeans at least know it. It's a mountainous archipelago with fishing villages, so quite picturesque in many people's minds. So we studied this archipelago close by that because we didn't want to go into a tourist hotspot. And the main reason for that is some people go to tourist hotspots for various reasons. So they might be climate independent. Like if you go to the Eiffel Tower, you don't really care if it's what kind of weather it is, at least as long as it's not fog, so you can enjoy the view from the tower. And the other area was a non-developed large island close by. And the third case area was Svalbard, which is halfway between the Scandinavian peninsula and the North Pole. So that is really a kind of offbeat place, quite expensive to go to and even more expensive to stay in. So it's at the northernmost part of Svalbard is at 80 degrees north, and now we are at 30 degrees, aren't we? It's approximately Las Palmas. Are there some geographers here? Anyway, it's far north. So that's the real Arctic. So we wanted also to see the difference between those areas, because people would go to the Svalbard Island in order to experience ice and snow, and they might also occasionally see a polar bear. So even you have to have good luck. And since these case areas are also north of the Arctic Circle, they also have a special tourism attraction in the summertime, namely the midnight sun. The sun do not go down there from approximately mid-May to the end of July. So if you want to have really a sunny holiday, all day sunny holiday, you could go there. That means also you can go mountain walking at midnight. But at least these changes, they call for studies that explore tourist stated in situ weather tolerances, preferences, and assessment. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have people's reactions while they were there. Because if you ask people about a hypothetical situation, you might get different answers. Not necessarily. We also wanted those people who actually are people who would go there. Because we could have asked also had a sample of Western Europeans more generally, but that would have been prohibitively expensive, because Norway is mainly special interest tourism, so very few people would go there. So partly because it's expensive, but also because it is so you have to have some special interest to go there. And research gaps that we identified, they include how leisure travelers might react to weather aspects during their visit, whether they prolong their stays on occasions of preferable weather, or whether they leave areas earlier under non-favorable conditions, and how weather conditions might impact on their experiences and also their return intentions. And for those areas in the Scandinavian peninsula or these archipelagos, many of these people had their own vehicles, they had their own wheels, so they could move along. So if they didn't like the weather on a particular day, they could just move along. While in Svalbard, most people, they would have to stay, because it would have been very expensive to leave earlier, to change their flight booking and things like that. Many people there had booked something called expedition cruises along these Arctic coasts. So they would have to stick to not only the destination but also the weather. So in that sense, we also have different case areas. These are the research questions of the first paper we published in Annals of Tourism Research. How do tourists perceive weather conditions during their stay? And then we analyzed only the Vesterålen area vistas, because we found that the sample that was easiest to work with, and we didn't want to mix up two case areas because they were quite different in some ways. And how well these perceptions correspond to their prior expectations, and also weather statistics. It's quite simple weather statistics in that paper. Later on, we collaborated closely with the Met Office. And the research question 2 was, how do tourists adapt their activities to different weather conditions? And research question 3 was, how do weather conditions impact on tourists' intentions to return to the area? So partly a hypothetical question, but we also asked them if they really wanted to go back. And as you might have discussed already, some studies of relationships between weather and leisure travel have overlooked the fact that people travel to places despite adverse or unfavorable or unpredictable weather, so, which is the case of particularly the Svalbard archipelago. And weather is also a distinguishing aspect of tourist destination images, particularly these sunny islands, but also in other places. So even if most places are portrayed with blue skies mostly, people would have some knowledge about the weather, and that could have an impact on not only if they would go or not, but also when they would go. So and weather also, of course, have impact on destination choices, in situ choices, what you do when you're there. Like yesterday evening, or late evening, or yesterday night, it was raining heavily in Arrecife. So that if we had wanted to have a late night on Tongue, that could have impacted on our stay there. And unpleasant weather is, of course, a cause of tourist dissatisfaction in some ways. But if adverse weather or unfavorable weather doesn't continue over several days, it might have limited impact. That was what we saw from some of these earlier studies. And also in previous research, air temperature has often been considered the most influential climate variable. And several tourism climate indexes, you have been into those earlier. Michovsky was a pioneer in this field. So they emphasize temperature. So I think Michovsky, temperature was 50%, if I remember right, in his tourism climate index. And many of these studies have also been expert studies. So tourist experts have decided what is favorable for your holiday. But we thought it would be better to ask the visitors themselves, because they're experts on their own lives, as you know from your research. And concentration on climate well-being, which is of course important in many parts of tourism, it does not take into account in our minds tourist interest in places where superlative weather conditions for outdoor pursuits are not prevailing. So, for instance, the people would go to Svalbard knowing that it would be quite cold, it would be quite windy, might be mist covering some of the mountain peaks and things like that. So we thought, and also I think particularly Daniel Scott of Canada has also been into some of the same issues, that a universal climate index might be conceptually unsound, because tourists are, they don't belong to the same tribe, all of them. So some like it hot and some don't. And earlier indices of Northern Europe's adverse weather have not taken into consideration in our minds the large variety of travel interests that some people might not be interested in climatic well-being. We even heard rumors, but we never documented, that some people going to Svalbard, they imposed frostbites on themselves voluntarily to have some the documentation of their visit to this icy place with polar bears. And sightseers, they want to see the sights. So if you want to see snow and ice, of course it can't be all that hot. And also travelers pursuing place-bound activities, in our case area, typically saltwater fishing and whale watching. They might also be unresponsive to undramatic but unfavorable weather. So previous research also indicates that vacationers may not have clear definitions of. Yes, of course.
Of course, I didn't fully understand. You talked about the climate index here.
Yes.
You can think of rain and so on. And then you said it's no universal and so on. But you related that to the effects of the climate index. But because, I mean, as you said, going to Svalbard, maybe the weather is not the most important factor, but it hasn't to do with the index as such.
Sorry, I thought you'd been into that earlier. So the tourism climate, Michovsky, he developed some called Tourism Climate Index some decades ago, and that was meant to be a universal climate index, and temperature was the main part of that. So there were some other aspects also. I don't remember them in detail, but at least some of these tries to develop climate indexes, they have in our minds overemphasized temperature, because people would go to like places like Svalbard independent of rather low temperatures, and also the wind chill effect, which can be severe in that area. So we thought that's our study in some ways opposed some of these earlier studies. I think it was Bas Amelung in Netherlands and his colleague, one of his colleagues, you can find it in the papers, they stated in one of their expert-based study which was partly based on the climate index, that Scandinavia had unfavorable summer weather for tourism, and in our minds that was kind of an overgeneralization. So partly because people would go there despite the weather conditions, but also because there are local weather varieties. So even if you are, even if you do not like really cold weather, there are pockets with local climates. So you can't use such generalizations for such huge areas. Like, you know, for instance, the British Islands, they are so wet and windy, while the area where I live in Oslo, Norway, it is sheltered from the bad weather that mostly comes from the west. So Oslo in summer, so it might be rainy nearly all summer, but it might also be sunny and blue skies and temperatures in the higher 20s. Yes, please.
Would it be the case that weather is something intrinsic to the distribution of people? And about the difference between expectations and perceptions or realizations of the world?
Yes, so that's one of the aspects we're into. So often there is this confirmation that's one of the results of this study, that the weather is better than people thought beforehand. So, but still, in some areas, weather is not really the main aspect. So if you want to have a beach holiday, it must be warm enough to lay down on the beach. So then temperature is of course important, but also the wind chill effect is even more important. Like some of the beaches on these islands, they have severe wind chill effects in January, for instance. So if I went to Isla Graciosa, it would often be too windy to be on the beach, even if the temperature is in the mid-20s. So there are so many aspects to take into consideration here. But our position to the climate index was that one should not overemphasize temperature as such, because maybe I didn't make it clear enough that we think that it is the subjective perceptions of some of these aspects that are important, and those perceptions also can be different for the same destination. So like some years ago, I was in Coralejo in Fuerteventura, and that was in January, early January. So I know what it would be like. So I had a windbreaker and a pullover and things. But some people, they had gone to what they call the south in Northern Europe. Some British people, so they were walking around in t-shirts and shorts in the evening, even if it was windy. So in that sense, you're right. People have perceptions of those. But people do not always check out properly either. I don't know if that was an answer, but we'll come back to some of these issues also. Should I? Give you a brief introduction to the survey. So we conducted a survey in 3 areas, as I said. This is the Vesterålen archipelago, which is a mountainous archipelago close by the Lofoten Islands, and these 2 archipelagos, they are like out into the North Atlantic or the Norwegian Sea, but they are linked to the mainland, so they're not archipelagos in the sense as Canary Islands. So you can take your car and go there without ferries, but you can also go by ferry. So there is a coastal route that is commercially labeled as the whale route. So we use those ferries because then people had to queue for the ferries. So that was a nice place to do interviews. Like I heard you conduct interviews in airports. So it's more or less the same. People have the time to answer questionnaires, even if they can't be very long questionnaires. So we had questionnaires in 8 different languages. We contacted nearly 1,000 persons, and we got an effective sample of 847. So response rate is approximately 87, which is quite high. But also, and that is because we had so good people at the ferry landings. We had questionnaires in many languages, and people had time to answer. So might discuss it. Is this really the response rate? Because there might be people who arrived just before the ferry departed, so we would miss them. But at least it gives you a picture. It's a quite good response rate. 54% international tourists, 62% first-timers, 54% with a higher education. So people here, this educational level reflects the quite high educational level in Scandinavia as such, but also that this is special interest tourism areas. So people who go there, they would be quite well off, not rich. Scandinavian countries are heavily taxed, as a Swedish colleague can tell you. But they are maybe some middle class, but of course there were some local people, not really local, but regional visitors also. So those people who lived in the area, or near the area, they were accepted from the survey. So these are only leisure travelers who do not live in the Västerholm area or close by the Västerholm area. And we asked them to describe how often they encountered different weather conditions during their visit to the Västerholm archipelago. Some people had stayed there very shortly, some people had stayed there for several nights. And their overall perception of weather, we had a quite simplistic scale, also in order to make it possible to complete the questionnaire in a short time. So I think we had a time frame of 7 minutes or something like that for quite speedy people. Some people were slower though, but it should be possible for normal people to fill in the questionnaire in a time frame of 7 to 8 minutes. And expectations also. How was the weather compared to expectations you had before the visit? The idea people might have of destination image, including weather. And also we had a simplistic scale here.
What does the respondent understand about weather?
Pardon?
How do you define weather in questionnaire?
How do we define weather? We didn't. People did themselves. So there's a subjective study. So people had ideas. We decided very early in the project. We discussed with the Met Office people. We had 3 meteorologists in this project also. That we should use the term weather because people do not relate to climate. So climate is often defined as long-term average weather. So weather is in Spanish las tiempas, something like that. Le temps, but tiempo, that's it. Yeah. So I speak very little Spanish, but some French I learn in school, so I understand some. So we didn't define it, but there was no problem. We tested the questionnaire. Also, we had a full-scale test the year before, actually. So we conducted personal interviews first. Then we had a full-scale test with several hundred questionnaires, and we had to reject some of our ideas. So this was the second year, the second summer season. That's one of the problems also with researching seasonal aspects, because you had to wait a year before we could conduct the real survey. So that delayed us a little, but it improved the quality of the survey. There's the people, they have a good knowledge of weather, so if they see weather, they know what it is.
My point is that some people, interpret the question in different ways. People, because of weather is a multi-dimension.
Yeah, so that's right. So, but this is subjective. So if you ask people, is it nice weather today? They will say, some people will say yes, and some people will say no. Here, for instance, there might be too many clothes for those on the Seminarios beach, but for those who want to just sit outside on the terrace and have a beer, they will say nice, at least if they have a pullover or something. I mean, so I fully understand your question, but I mean, so people filling in questionnaires, that was not a problem, but we had to deal with that, as I said. So what is weather and what is climate? I think we mentioned that discussion partly, but still, we in our tests and interviews, we did not see that as a problem at all. But that's also one of the problems with the tourism, with the attempts to develop a tourism climate index, is that people have very subjective experiences of weather. So, is it cool on the beach today? So, if you are there for sunbathing, it might be because it's partly overcast and maybe some places are exposed to wind. Speaking of these islands here today. So, but for other people, it is a warm day. If you just arrived from frosty Finland today, you say it's hot here. But people would not
wearing a t-shirt and wearing.
Yeah.
Very different.
So, but you're right that there might be some difficulties with that. We did not feel that was a difficulty in this case for subjective studies. So, and when it comes to measure, asked to indicate if they changed plans due to weather conditions. We had 9 possible alterations based on our personal interviews and the test year before, including prolongation or shortening of stay. And in this area, that made sense, while it did not make so much sense in Svalbard because they would be very expensive to leave. Return intentions also. So I'm taking this very casually because you can read the papers later on. So that's why I'm not going into very strict details of the study. And we had those alternatives. Yes, definitely. Yes, probably. And don't know as a middle ground. So the sequence here is strong because we coded don't know as the medium and know as the extreme. So this is kind of the highest value. This is a little lower. Don't know and definitely no. We used return intentions, a part of the study, but it's a problem with that also because these people are tourists, many of them, at least the international ones, more than holidaymakers. You probably remember Eric Cohen's old distinction between tourists and holidaymakers. So if you're holidaymakers, they might go back to the same place. So he called them habitués. So they might go to the summer house every year. While in tourists, they might not come back even if they're fully satisfied. They say, well, interesting, so what's next? So next year, they will go somewhere else. Even if they're fully satisfied, everything was perfect, but they want to see other places. So that's one of the problems using the return intentions in some ways. But we used this instrument still for kind of holiday satisfaction in this case, but with the limitations that it implies. And here is the kind of the overall results, and I should have added subjective weather perceptions here. So because this is all subjective, these are the visitor's view of how was the weather, what was the weather like, and for a large proportion, they said it was clear sky nearly all the time. Maybe it wasn't, but they felt like that. And rather warm. 22% found it rather warm 22% of the time. They were not Spanish, perhaps. And rather cool, 17% thought it was rather cool nearly all the time. And of course, the weather, they had been to different locations, and the weather varied also. This was conducted from late June until early August, the main holiday season. So some days were quite cool and frequently changing weather. Quite a few said not at all. Rain, not at all, 34%. But it might have rained at night, so they didn't discover it. We escaped the rain in Arrecife last night, so there was just a few drops before we went back to the hotel. After we went back early, but it poured down in the middle of the night. Here in this area, it's not heavy rain at all, or very rarely. So they might have rained without people noticing because it might have been a night. That is also one of the problems we had with the later study. So when does it rain? When is it sunny? Low visibility, not at all for a large proportion. High sea waves. These people, they might be aware of sea waves because they were waiting for ferries, and at least one of the ferries was exposed to high sea waves. So one of the ferries would be cancelled actually if there were high sea waves, not because it was dangerous, but because the crew didn't want to wash the saloons, the lounges, because people would get sick. And here we have a scale. The higher the score, the better the weather. And we see here that the domestic visitors, they find the weather slightly better than the international visitors. And also weather compared to expectations, it was slightly better for the domestic visitors than for the international visitors. But there's not a huge difference here. So as far as I remember, there were few differences also between the international visitors. So I think it was mainly, so I'm not sure if this is right, there were a few, maybe Italian and Spanish visitors who thought it was colder than the other ones. But overall, there were very few differences between those international visitors, and they came from from many different countries. I don't remember how many, but it was like they were from nearly all over Europe and also a few overseas visitors. So you might have been among those who would have corrected it and said, instead of rather cool, would have changed it to cold, perhaps. But most people did not, because they know where they were going. And also, of course, they had arrived in this area. So very few came straight in from, there are no direct flights from Madrid, for instance, that then they would have found it cold to arrive straightly. And these are the results for behavioral impacts. You keeping an eye on the time, are you? You see, nice weather made quite a few people stay longer than planned. Rain made some people leave the area sooner than planned. Low visibility made people leave the area sooner than planned. This is very much landscape sightseeing. So low clouds might imply that you can't see the mountain peaks. These are mountainous archipelagos, as I said. So the mountains, they raise from sea level up to, I think the highest mountain in that area is 1,260 meters. So you can't compare with Teide, of course, but it's still it's quite impressive, since these mountains, they by the sea. So this area is like Switzerland by the sea, more or less. Alpine places. Bad weather led to more indoor activities. You see that nearly one-tenth of these people answered positively to that. And this is good for the tourism industry, isn't it, or the hospitality industry. Bad weather led to more frequent use of restaurants and cafes. So some of these people in the restaurant business, they might hope for rain or strong wind, so they will get more customers. Very few people found saltwater fishing problematic. We asked only about saltwater fishing because there is also fishing here in lakes and streams, but that kind of fishing is not to the same degree weather influence. If you are in a small boat, you are exposed to the powers of the sea. And also, strong wind made hiking, hill walking problematic. A few people thought that. So some of them might not be very experienced. So Scandinavians, they're used to going into the landscape without in areas where there are no real paths. But some foreigners, as we used to say, they're afraid of the wild flowers, so they'll stick to the main paths. And rain made hiking and hill walking problematic. That's what you can experience in these islands also, particularly in La Gomera when it has been raining. The paths are slippery, so 6% on that also. So most visitors stick to their original plans, and the most common adjustment is and this summer was to prolong the stay due to nice weather. So the temperature was slightly higher than normal this year. So in another year we might have had some different percentages here, but the overall changes, they might have been the same. So there might have been a few more people here and a few less here in another year. But since these items are also based on our test, full-scale test, we know that these are the main issues. There might be some minor issues also that we did not ask about. So here you see, that 2/3 had no change in plans due to weather. 16% longest stays due to weather, mostly international visitors, to a large extent international visitors. Shorter stays, 5%, and other alterations, 13% altogether, and a bit more common among international visitors. So the overall picture is that people take the weather as it is, and they had to change some plans. And about 40% described the weather as rather warm, even though average maximum temperature was only 16.9 centigrades at that time. But that is also day temperature, so that's one of the problems we had with this in this project. And if you have some time left, I'll mention that in relation to when we compared climate projections, because we would have liked to have daytime temperature. So day here means the the 24-hour day. So it's not daytime. So the temperature here at daytime in this area might reach the high 20s. And we know from earlier studies also that most people, they conduct outdoor activities from quite early morning until approximately 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. North Europeans, they dine earlier than Spaniards, so so they usually call it a day at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And then the temperature might have been considerably higher because the night temperature close by the sea falls, it drops sharply. So one of the disadvantages of being in this area is that if you like to sit outside in your t-shirt in the evening, there might not be so many occasions for that. And overall, the results suggest that tourists have realistic pictures of the weather conditions here. There is a significant impact of visitor provenance on overall weather perceptions, demonstrating that characterizations of good and bad weather diverge between different types of visitors, underlining the subjective aspects definitely. And the results also indicate that most weather aspects have small behavioral impacts, in particular among domestic visitors in this area. Fairly high return intentions here, not influenced by weather perceptions. That is also if you fall in love with a place, you fall in love with the place also with its adverse weather aspects if there are some. And as I mentioned already, the study to some degree belies the conclusions of Nichols and Amelung that summer weather in many North European regions are unfavorable for tourism. So our study indicates that is not the right way of seeing this. So, and our findings are more in accordance with Daniel Scott and his colleagues, who reckon summer climate in America's northern areas as to be favorable for tourism. So all this relates then to the heavy emphasis on temperature in these earlier expert-based studies, particularly the tourism climate indexes. We conclude that weather conditions should not necessarily be considered a major barrier to tourism in high-latitude destinations, particularly not this area, but also we later found for Svalbard as well. And tourists are likely to adjust weather expectations. So the people in this area, they conduct different activities, some more or less independent on weather aspects. So how much are you keeping an eye on the... and the managerial implications from this study is that understanding impacts of weather conditions on tourist activities and satisfaction, it should be crucial to designing marketing policies. Also, there has been some industry people in that area have thought earlier that they should sell foul weather during the summer, and we think based on this study that is not a good idea, because you cannot really deliver on that, because most of the adverse weather in that area, summer weather, is undramatic. So there's in most areas where tourists move, there is hardly gale, for instance, as a strong wind as strong as gale, and only very few areas are exposed to high waves, and even if there are some exposed areas. So there is, for instance, some beaches which are very good for surfers. So there might be some special interest also among those already special interest tourists. So like Caleta da Famara, there is a beach in some beaches in these areas which resembles Caleta da Famara and Lanzarote, if you know that, it's a surfer place. So there are quite a few beach bumps there already. We got some strange comments from at least one of the reviewers I don't remember which paper that was. I think it was the last paper in tourist management, that visitor weather perceptions might change in the future. And this review indicated that might be a problem with our findings. But so we discussed this in the team, but we concluded that there will hardly be any tourist demand for frequent rain and low visibility also in the future. So we know that that maybe some people from Saudi Arabia, they would like to experience rain, but they would not like frequent rain. So one shower is good enough, I think. And low visibility, there's hardly any. So most of these people also come from Western Europe, so they have rain and low visibility at home also in the summer. So we were very much in disagreement with that. So most visitors' overall experience seem not to be heavily influenced by weather. So this implies that promoting Norway's Arctic littoral and similar areas as experiencing harsh weather, summer weather, seems not to be wise. And finally, for occasions with adverse weather, tourism enterprises might develop weather-independent products and product attributes. And they could also promote self-organized pursuits that first-timers might not be aware of. And there were also a few other comments also, maybe development of trails, which is in some ways in opposition to parts of Scandinavian outdoor life, but this study did not discuss that explicitly, but some other studies that some of the people in the team have conducted indicate that development of trails might be also a good idea here. So that would imply that you could go for walks in the hills and in the mountains, even if it had been raining last night. So the slippery paths would not be a problem. So, and of course there are some limitations. There is an unknown population, so that might lead to sampling error. But what we did, we have long experience from such studies. We have conducted en route surveys also. I forgot to mention this is an en route survey. So that means that that is a traffic flow that we are researching. So we have chosen certain times in this traffic flow. So over a period of 6 weeks, we varied the days. So we had covered all days of the week, and we covered most of the day. Also, we knew from both the ferry company and from our previous studies in the area that we did not need to cover the first ferry in the morning because that would be only commuters, and we did not need to take the last ferries in the evening either. A limitation is only information from visitors, and also there was minor rain and fairly high temperatures, slightly higher than the 30-year average. And a simplistic questionnaire is always a limitation also. But still, we often have to operate with simplistic questionnaires. You can't use very long questionnaires. I remember many years ago I did a pioneering visitor survey in the Lofoten archipelago close by, and that was a 16-page questionnaire. And people answered. But that was 1991, so they don't do that anymore. So even the Germans were willing to answer nearly everything at that time. And we had some time left, so I briefly mentioned the other study, Cool Weather Tourism and the Global Warming, which was in close collaboration with the Met Office people. And as I said, this is interdisciplinary research, so it's quite challenging. So we had to establish a common ground in this project between various people. So the key stuff where I was the project manager, we had the total funding for the project was something like, how would that be in euros? The euros, it's not so valuable anymore as it was when we started. So something like 1.5 million euros, 1.6 million euros. So that was approximate budget, I don't know. But a lot of that was for personnel costs, so we could not spend on champagne and things like that. So we had on board, so as I said, I'm trained as a sociologist, but it's a long time ago since I mainly was into that. We had Martin Lohmann, a German psychologist, who's one of the pioneers of tourism weather studies. He was with us. Jon Martin Densali is a research economist at the Institute of Transport Economics, with partly specializing in tourism. So he was with us. 3 people from the Met Office. They were all meteorologists, but slightly different backgrounds. One was the earlier head of the climate department at the Norwegian Met Office. So they had really a track record in their fields. And we had also vegetation ecologist, because that was partly because we wanted to see look at some of the climate-related changes on the landscapes, particularly reforestation. That because of various reasons, these areas are reforested. Partly because there is less agriculture, it is less profitable in Norway with high wages and things like that, and also the tree line. So how far up in the mountains the tree grows, it is elevating because of climate change. So it's partly related to agriculture, partly climate. So we had, that was a small part of that. But this vegetation ecologist, he has been involved in tourism research also earlier. He was involved in a project. He was actually the head of a quite large project on tourism and landscape change. So some of these people, I was quite trained in this kind of collaboration, and so was this vegetation ecologist. And some of the Met Office people had also some training. They had collaborated with anthropologists, for instance, when it comes to living conditions more generally, and changes in that in Europe's northern areas. So we had to establish common ground. So this paper is really the interdisciplinary paper in tourist management. The research questions there were partly similar to the other. What are the preferred and disliked weather variables for summer season leisure travelers in northern Norway? We used the Vesterålen case area also in this paper. And what are the present states of the preferred and disliked weather conditions specified by the summer tourists in that area? And how will climate change influence weather conditions important for leisure travelers? So these were the main questions in that. So I'm not going into the climate paper published in climate research, which also include the Svalbard sample. So if you're interested in the high Arctic and polar bears, you have to read that by yourself. So what was necessary to do here was that the Met Office people were collaborating also in the design of the questionnaire. So we had long conversations, also to establish this common ground. And also, what kind of data would we need from the Met Office to throw light on this? Because the historical meteorological data, they were not so customized for tourism research. They hadn't given tourism research a thought when they developed their earlier time series. So we had to take what they had. But they had some thresholds also that were not particularly suitable. So we also had to argue about that, because they had, for instance, they had two temperature thresholds. They had what they called a warm day, which when the temperature would be the daily mean, so 24-hour mean would be above 20 centigrades. You would probably not find it warm, but they still call it a warm day. But it could be warm at daytime, because then it would be in the upper 20s and even higher than that in sheltered valleys and places like that. And they had cool days when they had a threshold below 10 centigrades, which could occur in the early part of what is here called the summer season. We also had to define the summer season. So we decided for June, July, and August. Because we would have a longer time span than just the main tourism season. So this is the peak statistics. It really looks very alpine here, because Scandinavians usually have their summer holidays, and I think they still have from so late June until early August. So that's partly defining this, but also the midnight sun, which is why some people go there. It is possible to see the midnight sun in the northernmost part of mainland Scandinavia from mid-May until late July. So that also has an influence on the peak season. And in the Western archipelago, the last day for midnight sun at approximately 22 or 24 July. So that contributes to the peaking of the summer season. So for summer season, as I said, June, July, and August. But we also had to have some specific data for June and July, because we wanted to know the cloud cover in relation to midnight sun. So we wanted to know cloud cover at midnight for as many stations as possible. So we had some quite long discussions about what was possible, what do we need. So it was quite complex to begin with, but now when you read it, you see this is just a piece of cake. So here you can find all these things that we had, all these definitions. So now this is really probably what you wanted, what is weather and what is climate. Here is the daily mean, daily minimum temperature, daily maximum, cool day, mild day as we added. But we had only daily mean as for projections, so that was the problem, because we knew the daily maximum and the daily minimum also, but not for projections, so that was the problem. These climate models that they operate with to project, and also for some of these aspects they were not included in the climate models, so they had to make prolongations of the time series they already had. Precipitation. And we had to define what is a wet day. And for some people, it doesn't matter if it rains at night. So a wet day is the daily precipitation of 1 millimeter or more, which is perhaps, so some people would not find that annoying. So we had some other data. Also, we used a webcam. But we didn't have funding to publish on that, because we used a webcam close by the main meteorological station in that area. So we recorded, is it wet on the roads at different times of the day at that webcam, because it has a long time series, I think 12 or 14 years. So that's also a possibility to study this if there is a webcam in an area with long time series. So we, maybe if I get rich from the research, we could publish on that later on. We had to define cloudiness. They define it in octaves. Day with overcast sky, we had to define a sunny day. Day with midnight sun, when there is has a value of when less than half the sky is covered by clouds at midnight, which is also if you want to see the midnight sun. But of course this is also tricky, because like the sun is very low on the horizon at midnight. So if there are close up there with no there, then it's still nice. But they didn't have, they could not deliver on that. So, and they with reduced visibility, they also defined. So we had all these. Yes, please.
These terms are checked with people, or are these scientific terms?
These are Met Office terms that we slightly changed because we didn't like these. We were not pleased with cool day and warm day, so we wanted something in between, because for many visitors, when the daily mean is 15, then the daily maximum would be about 20. So for many of these people, that would be a warm day. Often it's not very windy here also. So, but they are not Spanish, so they think it's warm when it's 18 plus, perhaps. So these are Met Office terms that we had slightly to modify. So this was what we agreed on in the end. That was what they could deliver after a long discussion. So these are, they would say they are scientific terms. So at least they are the measurements that we had to live with. So these are not subjective, not at all. So these are Met Office terms. And I don't know how they cover the clothes, how they count the clothes, but they have some, they use some prisms or something. So I trusted them on these these issues. So and here comes the subjective part. We asked them, because when it comes to weather preferences, it's difficult to say what you really prefer. So we wanted them to think about what kind of weather would you prefer on a possible future visit to the case areas. And you see here, these asterisks, they indicate that there are differences between the Norwegian visitors and the international visitors. So, for instance, the Norwegian visitors would to a higher degree like it to be rather warm. The results from Svalbard were different, because then there you want to see snow and ice and polar bears. So So you can look into that paper later on. Rather cool. You see here also that there was a difference here. Would not like it. The Norwegians, they would like it to a lesser degree. And also because, like, if you go to the high north, it doesn't really matter so much. And frequent rain, when it comes to frequent rain, it is the international visitors who dislike that the most. The Norwegians, they have better raincoats, perhaps, I don't know. So you see here what they would prefer and what they would dislike. So we got a quite good picture of their preferences. And what did we use that for? Yes, we wanted to see how this aligns with or not aligns with likely future weather in that area. And here comes the climate predictions, because the typical climate predictions, they go up to 2100. But tourism industry, they think that's quite long term. They're used to thinking more of tomorrow's breakfast than how the business will be like in 2100. So we also had some data on 2050, but some of these changes, they're already taking place. So some of these developments, they're already there. So we think that this is also interesting in the medium term for the next decades, so to say. These are some details about temperature at the station, so I'll skip that. Rainfalls, you see, there are quite a lot of wet days, but that's because they had this low threshold of 1 millimeter. So if the threshold had been higher, there would not be so many days with wet days. But you see, very few days with heavy rainfall. Because that also, if you're not familiar with meteorology, so the lower the temperature, the less humidity in the atmosphere. It's as simple as that. So that means that in these areas there might be more heavy rainfall in the future, but there is so little of that today. So even if it increases a lot, you'll see in the future there will be still very few days with heavy rainfall. So the station that has this is the Buda. Yeah, there will be like 3 days with heavy rainfall during the summer season in the future. So that's not really a big change. While there will be more wet days, but we are not really pleased with that threshold, because we wanted to know, will it be wet at daytime when people are going out for these walks, and they could not give us those data. So some of you might be familiar with Besançon, are you? Climat et Tourisme, a French researcher who wrote this nice book some years ago, because he's discussing that. So it's very important when it rains, so for tourists, of course. So he has been discussing that in detail. So that is also an expert-based study, but it is much more detailed than some of these other contributions. I think it has been translated into Spanish also. Yeah, we can look into that later on. So there will be more wet days, definitely with this low threshold. There will be more days with heavy rainfall, but heavy rainfall is still there's so little of that, so it doesn't matter really. So the survey results, as you remember, showed a predominant preference for clear skies. We actually wanted to call this paper "Nothing but clear sky, nothing but blue skies," and the main dislikes are frequent rain and low visibility, as we mentioned already. And there is a fondness for rather warm weather and aversion towards cool weather, particularly among domestic visitors. Climate statistics show that the present states of some of these weather variables are not congruent with tourist preferences. So between 30 and 70% of summer season days from June to August are cool by the Met Office term, but this is still the day mean. Precipitation is fairly modest, and high intensity rainfalls are rare. And most summer season tourists in Norway are likely to experience clear sky during the stay in the region. So we also, like we had the duration of their total trip and the duration of the stay in these regions, the Vesterålen and Senja. So it was possible to see that they stayed long enough to averagely experienced that. But the climate projections, they indicate significant changes in weather conditions. So I'm just jumping to conclusions, as the English would say, throughout the present century. In Met Office terms, radical temperature increases likely in many areas. So one third of future summer days from June to August will have daily mean of 15 or higher. And this meets the preference, particularly among domestic visitors. So the future climate, and now we're speaking of long-term average weather, which is climate, meets a preference among Norwegians. So they might want to spend more of their holidays here instead of going to Gran Canaria, perhaps. We didn't ask about Gran Canaria, though. And the number of future cool days is expected to be less than half of the present, using this Met Office threshold of 10, which we are not very pleased with either. Because we thought a cold day would be, if it was not windy, actually 7 centigrades. We tried to ask a few people, we didn't have enough funding, and the Met Office would not change this anyway. So we think the threshold for cold days is lower than 10, actually. And this was also the daily mean. A few more future days with heavy rainfall will increase, but this is not so much of a problem, and we want, in a future perspective, we'd like to know more about when the rain will fall. So we hope that they will also improve some long-term improvement of climate statistics, so we can use this more for tourism research, and also for the average well-being of the locals also. You've been into well-being, you told me, so that's also important in people's everyday life in this area. So how would that change? We hope to study winter season also, because there might be much stronger climate change influence on winter. More wet days are accompanied by few days with clear or partly clouded sky, and more days with overcast sky. And this does, of course, not correspond with visitor preferences. More days with overcast sky will reduce possibilities for setting ice on mountain peaks. The landscape sightseeing will be influenced by this. And particularly, it will have an influence on possibilities to see the midnight sun, which will be even more a stroke of good luck to see the midnight sun if you visit these areas. So present possibilities for watching sun at midnight is now between 15 and 20 days, and it will be reduced by a few days. So that will negatively impact on tourism. But it could also lead to longer stays. So if you really want to see midnight sun from North Cape, so you might allocate 5 days in North Cape just to make sure. So some of these changes might also impact on the duration of stays, but we couldn't go into that, a simplistic questionnaire. And increasing temperatures will stimulate tourism demand in the area. More wet days is clearly a downside, but we still want to know more about when this wetness occurs. Combination of more wet days and continued interest in open air activities might imply that certain outdoor activities become less attractive in the future. One should consider better facilitation of outdoor recreation, as I already mentioned. Prospective visitors might benefit from more complete and accurate climate information rather than these simple overviews that are presently given to them both in guidebooks and in marketing material. And so that's it. And I think there is one of these left. And the limitations again. A limitation is that these climate projections, they do not specify time of day for future precipitation, and we would have liked to have future daytime temperature. And results indicate that employment and tourism climate indexes have been too narrow, as mentioned already. So this is what we learned. And if you're interested in the details, you find this at Science Direct. And also for this climate research paper, we bought open access, so you can get it freely on behalf of the Research Council of Norway. So they paid for that. So that was more or less what I would like to share with you. You can read all these things. We also have some papers on industry perceptions of weather, how the industry people, tourism and hospitality industry people are thinking about this. So the one paper is published in Anatolia. It's called "Who Can Stop the Rain?" And the most recent paper is published, or is being published now in Scandinavian Journal of Hospitality and Tourism. So that's it. And we have one more paper coming up also in a special issue of Scandinavian Journal of Hospitality and Tourism. I think it is the last issue next year. So it's coming up there, some more details from this study. I don't remember exactly, something we presented at the American Geographers meeting last winter in New York. So there are a few more things in the pipeline, and we hope to continue with this this field. So hopefully there will be a new climate research program, and we're ready to write the proposals. Same Met Office people again. So this is an interesting issue that I've learned already that you're very concerned with that also in this climate-dependent destination area, the Canary Islands.